Thank you. Thank you for your applause. I am going to share with you my screen. Is it visible? Thank you. This project I'm bringing to you is the finishing project of my bachelor's degree in ISEP, Institute, the Superior Institute of Engineering in Porto. And before we dive into the title, because it's a long title, I have to say that this is the cumulative effort of 3 years of studies. The project I'm bringing to you today is the system project, and I will explain it in a second, the remote Arduino laboratory Constellation. My issue was to study and to develop a solution to solve the platform management. So what was the project's context? The ambition for the system project for schools is to give didactical materials to schools for students between the age of 14 and 18 in the field of electronics and digital technologies. These materials are for students to do everything they can at their disposal. These with hands-on projects which will be readily and freely available. And what's the objective? What the objectives of this project? Well, it's to increase student engagement with technologies and electronics. Why? Because we're trying to promote science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM for short. This literacy is what leads to the development of evidence-based decision skills, which is key to be able to prepare for the professional challenges of the future. It is said that this type of skills and challenges is growing at least twice the rate at other professions. Other professions are even getting extinguished. So what is a remote Arduino laboratory? Let's start with Arduino. Arduino is a breadboard. For short, it's a set of circuitry that people can just place, give signals, and some components installed on these breadboards, they will perform certain actions. But how do we give these electrical impulses? How do we tell these components to operate? Well, that's with the help of this, a microcomputer. This microcomputer is what allows us, the user, to connect with the circuitry. But this composes a laboratory. But why is it remote? That's because you don't need to have this. You can access this through a webcam that's far, far away, giving you the image of what you're doing. But this imagery is kind of complicated. So let's simplify. It's a camera looking at circuits. Are we all clear? Yeah. So our existing solution, the starting point of my project had an existing solution. It was a unique platform, there was only one, with the ability to schedule reservations for a single remote Arduino laboratory. How do all these pieces fit together? To keep it simple, a user would access the platform, then choose a time slot, and when that time slot arrived, a person could finally access a laboratory. Then you start to think, what is everything all right with this? First glance, yeah, sure. But what's actually happening here is that everything's connected. If the laboratory fails, the whole system fails. And this is what you can see. What about what you cannot see? What you can't see is that what happens when other users try to access at the same time? It happens that they can't. Well, wouldn't an easy solution to be just adding more laboratories so that people could choose which laboratory they'd access? Imagine you have 100 laboratories. Does it make sense? Would it make sense for you to memorize every single location of every single laboratory? It's the same as asking you to memorize all the contacts on your phone without your phone, without an address book. That's why we're building the remote Arduino laboratory Constellation, our constellation of experimentation. It's a centralized service designed to support multiple laboratories. With multiple laboratories, we'll be able to drive the number of accesses up, dealing with more experimentation, and finally getting to our increase in student engagement. We are finally working towards our objective. But for this, we need new features. We need the system to support, well, if you had one laboratory, we may need more. We may need to be able to add laboratories. Then, what happens when we have 100 laboratories? We need to search for them. And do you think that scheduling works the same? It doesn't. It doesn't, because if you have 100 laboratories, one user shouldn't be able to access them all at the same time. And that's why we have to design a new solution where we have many users. They're all given the same platform, but this platform is not responsible for doing any processing. The processing is done by an external engine, an engine that is responsible for the addition, the searching, and the scheduling of reservations in laboratories. Do you think there's anything missing? Well, there is. Those laboratories. Now, the system exists with or without them, but they are independent from everything else. So now we have two completely distinct systems. The starting point on your left and the finishing product, completely segmented and isolated in layers to simplify the life of users, where a user can just access the platform and have access to every single laboratory. This was the developed project. I thank you for your attention. I'm driving you to have doubts and questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael Marques. I'm sure that was very thought-provoking, and we are all delighted to have a slot of time now where we can ask questions. So anybody in the audience is welcome to ask Rafael Marques some questions about this constellation experimentation, which will make the future better for our students. So hooray to that. So questions. Francisco.
Okay, so I have not one, not two, but actually three questions. So first one, I didn't quite get the laboratories. So you require a manual setup of each individual laboratory for then someone to access remotely, right?
Yes, both in the current system and in the new system or in the new solution. What happens is that the system, in the old solution, it required for a person with somewhat advanced knowledge to be able to set up the whole system, both the laboratory, all the systems required to make available the solution to students. In the new solution, we're trying to simplify this process, where the platform exists with or without the laboratories. Yes, they require a person outside the system to set them up, but it's much more simplified, as even a student is now designed to, after some experimentation, if they want to buy a kit, to buy the materials necessary to build one of these laboratories for themselves, they will have instructions and the possibility to add more laboratories. So it won't just be academic personnel to build and make available these laboratories, but also students.
Also, following on that, so what happens is, if, for example, I'm a student and I access a laboratory and I need, or I want to add, for example, a cable to an LED or something, or I need something to be added to the laboratory. do I put in a request? Is it automatic? Is someone standing by to add something that I need, or is something that I have to fill a request? And then I will be notified when the add-on or the plugin was installed.
That's a very good question. It wasn't one of the features that I presented because it was somewhat out of the scope, but it was developed a system where a user requests any modification regarding even malfunctions, not just addition of material, but malfunctions. So an email is sent to the owner of the laboratory, and then because now every laboratory will have a responsible person or set of people that is in charge of maintaining and updating every laboratory according to the students' needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I have a follow-up question based on that also. So it's pretty much like a domino of questions. So what happens if I have my project set up and I have my laboratory working, and for some reason the connection to that laboratory crashes, or I'm unable to connect for due to some unknown reason? What happens then? Is it possible that I can switch to a similar laboratory that has the same setup to continue work on my project, or do I have to wait for maintenance to get it working again?
So let me see if I understood the question. You lost the connection due to your own connectivity or to this laboratory's connectivity?
I would say to the laboratory. So if the point of connection on their side, if something happens there, do I have to wait for them to put everything back in circulation working again? Or am I able to switch to another laboratory seamlessly, or to choose another one with the same setup of my previous one so that I can continue my work?
I understand your question. The issue is the time of response, because you can determine how much time there is in your reservation. And if the laboratory is flagged as not active or not operational, in effect, you do not have a reservation. Therefore, you can activate another reservation in another laboratory. The only issue would be human error or human response time, where you would have to wait for a human, an administrator in this case, to set the laboratory as not active. I say not active as in a set of states different from active, because there is pending activation, malfunctioning, among others.
Okay, I gotcha. I have just one final question. Sorry. German, you can go. If we have time, I can share my other one.
Well, in this case, I don't know if before it was Germano or Raquel.
German, go ahead. I'll go
Okay.
after you.
Rafael, so basically this new system is an optimization of labs, right? Can I offer myself a laboratory?
Let me break it down into two issues. You initially said an optimization of laboratories. I would not state it like that, because the laboratories present similar features. What we're trying to do is to add something to the user so that this one user has the ability to connect to multiple laboratories, but the laboratories themselves have similar functionalities. But now the second part of it, you said offer yourself a laboratory. I want to rephrase it as, if you can submit an application for your laboratory to be part of the Constellation. Is that correct? Yes. You, as a user, any user can register. It's targeted for students, but you don't actually have to be a student to access these laboratories. You just need to have an active email account. Well, then after registering, we have a list of instructions telling you the materials you have to buy, the steps to build the hardware system, and then you can submit an application telling us which components are in your laboratory, What's the institution you would want to be connected to, the name of your laboratory. You can even send us a picture of what is the representation of your laboratory. And then that request would be sent for approval, and an administrator user or an administrator level user would have to approve and activate your laboratory so that it would belong to the constellation. Would that answer your question?
Yeah. And do you know if I will receive an income on that?
No, it isn't. That's not the initial purpose of the project. In a future iteration, we're expecting to make partnerships with the material suppliers so that there's some sort of revenue. But I don't know if it would work as an influencer in other platforms. That's not the initial purpose of the project. Raquel, you had a question?
My question was connected to what Germain already asked, because I'd also understood that it was about maximizing the use of existing labs, but that's not the case, right? Because then that would probably, from your explanation I understood afterwards, it would probably bring problems in terms of maybe people in the wrong time zone would have a problem and nobody could solve it, right? So it's...
I think I understand your question. And the way you phrased it, you would say that you want to give the maximum usage to a laboratory. Yeah. But I believe it's quite the opposite. It's to have enough laboratories that you just can respond to all the demand. Because the initial project was extremely constrained and limited, as it only had one laboratory. If it worked, everything was all right. But not yet, because you only had one variation of components. You couldn't work with it in different ways. So not only are you trying to have more users actively engaging with these laboratories, but actually exploring different combinations of components so that you can just branch out in every combination possible.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? We've got time for one more question. Oh, Francisco, with your fourth question, yes.
Yes, my last question. Is there any future plan to, so everybody can hear me, right? Yeah. So is there any future plan to add some sort of emulation to the laboratory? So you may not require a physical one and just an emulation of the boards that you could digitally cross wires, connect pins, and do something like that. So you might not, as a first step, you might not require a physical laboratory, and as a second step, you could actually request a physical one for interaction.
I think I understood your question. You're in a pre-experimentation. You are thinking about emulating these connections and experiments, correct?
Yeah.
I believe that Arduino, the company itself, already provides this functionality, these emulators, in I believe it's called an Arduino laboratory, but it's not remote as how we branded it. It is just a virtual Arduino laboratory.
Okay. Okay, that answers my question.
Francisco, any more questions?
No. It's all for me.
Thank you, Rafael, for fielding those questions and leaping in there. Oh, yes, of course. Thank you very much. Like how you didn't even have to stop and breathe to think of the